right, we're going to call this hearing to order. House Appropriations Subcommittee on the Legislative Branch. Hearing on fiscal year 2020 budget request of the Library of Congress. Welcome. The library is an incredible national and international asset. It's the largest library in the world with more than 168 million items in its collections. In addition to books, there are maps, films, photographs, musical recordings, the collected papers of historical figures, repositories of oral histories, and more. While the library's buildings are here in Washington, an important part of the work is making its collections and resources available nationwide and beyond. The library now has numerous collections available in digital form through the internet, as well as programs for schools and other libraries. And its congress.gov website is a preeminent source of public information about legislation in Congress. The library carries out several other very important missions. One is the U.S. Copyright Office, performing a service vital to creative efforts in literature, music, the arts, and science. Another is the Congressional Research Service, an indispensable source of accurate, neutral, and timely information for congressional members, committees, and staff, with much of that information now being made available to the general public as well. There's also the unique programs of the National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, which provides books and periodicals in audio and Braille form to almost 500,000 people throughout the nation. This request is for a net appropriation of $747 million, an increase of $51 million, or 7% above the current year. That increase covers things like needed fixes to the library's IT systems, improvements to the legislative information systems for Congress and the public, a strategy to better exhibit the library's treasures to visitors, and some interesting new technology to make the written word more readily accessible to people who are blind. We'll take a close look at the request and see what can be done. I also bumped into former Chairman Yoder this morning, and he wanted me to pass along his regards to you. He's doing well, and I think he misses being a part of how special this committee is. So now I'd like to introduce our principal witness today. She is, of course, Dr. Carla Hayden, the 14th Librarian of Congress. Dr. Hayden came to the Library of Congress in 2016 from the Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore, where she was CEO. She has also held a number of other positions in public libraries throughout her career, a career which started as a children's librarian in Chicago. Dr. Hayden is joined at the witness table by Mark Sweeney, the Principal Deputy Librarian. I understand a number of other senior officers of the library are here as well and available to help answer any questions. Did we check if we're violating any fire codes with all the staff that has attended? But before we hear from Dr. Hayden, I'll yield to our distinguished ranking member, Ms. Herrera-Butler, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome Dr. Hayden and Principal Deputy Librarian Sweeney. That is a long title there. Thanks for coming. The Library of Congress, as was mentioned, is a national treasure that hosts millions of in-person visitors each year and even more visitors on the library's ever-expanding internet presence, which is pretty exciting. Its impact can be felt beyond its facilities here in D.C., and the library's online resources and educational programs reach schools and libraries in my home district of Southwest Washington, which is almost as far as you can get. I guess Hawaii probably always gets to claim a little further. It's the repository of our nation's history, and it's our obligation to preserve and expand the collection for future generations. So I would also like to mention the importance of the Native American special collections and how important your role in collecting and preserving the history, stories, and songs of Native Americans is to tribes and really for all the rest of us. Your collaboration with the Smithsonian's National Museum of American Indians has made possible significant gains in a traditionally underrepresented area. So before I conclude my remarks, I'd like to extend an invitation for you to visit my district. We would love to have you out and see the impact of the library in our region. And I look forward to your testimony and learning more about the Library of Congress. I yield back.
Dr. Hayden.
Thank you, Chairman Ryan and Ranking Member Herrera Butler and members of the subcommittee. This is a wonderful opportunity to provide testimony in support of the library's FY 2020 budget. And in my third year as librarian, I'm very encouraged by the advancements we've made in sharing more of the library's extraordinary collections and our staff's expertise with their commitment to public service. Last year, the library welcomed nearly 1.9 million in-person visitors. The Congressional Research Service provided custom services to 100% of the Senate and House member offices and standing committees. More than 450,000 claims were registered by the U.S. Copyright Office, and nearly 10 million preservation actions were performed on the physical collections. Over 20.9 million copies of Braille and recorded books and magazines were circulated, and the library responded to over 1 million reference requests from Congress, the public, and other federal agencies. And the library's website, including loc.gov, congress.gov, copyright.gov, and the CRS site, among others, received 110 million visitors and 503.1 million page views, quite a lot. So I'd like to start by expressing my gratitude to Congress for supporting our efforts. And I greatly appreciate the support you've given us for the high priority needs like CRS staffing, restoration of the copyright examiner workforce, support for the increased cost of hosting the legislative branch financial management system, and librarians and archivists to address a processing backlog in our special collections. We've also been able to have support for our library's collection storage modules, particularly in Fort Meade, as part of the Architect of the Capitol's budget. And today, discussing the FY 2020 budget, we are focusing on the fact that in the past year, we've completed organizational changes that have streamlined functions and support a more user-centered direction. Our strategic plan is in effect, and we are going with a user-focused direction in all of our units. The largest part of the library that Mr. Sweeney is directly involved in has now become Library Collections and Services Group that serves the Law Library, the National Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, and Library Services, the largest group. IT centralization with significant congressional support is in its final phase, with staff and funding transfers from CRS copyright to the Office of the Chief Information Officer, Mr. Bud Barton. The 4 goals of the strategic plan that was launched in October had 4 strategic goals: expand access, expand our services, optimize our resources, and measure our impact. Our first digital strategy, which complemented the strategic plan, was recently released and is featured on the cover, and we're very proud of this, of American Libraries. For the first time, the Library of Congress in many years is on the cover for our new digital strategy.
No picture of you on the cover there?
No, but our staff members are in here. We have it's really wonderful. And so with the fiscal 2020 budget, approximately $803 million, which represents a 6.8% increase over the library's fiscal 2019 enacted appropriation. It does include $26 million in mandatory pay and price increases, and the balance of the increase represents critical program investments necessary to fulfill the library's role and move forward. The 2 top goals in the new strategic plan, expand access and enhance services, aim to make these collections, these unique collections, and the experts and services available them move forward. And so we are very pleased to be able to give what is a first look into a major part of our focus in terms of enhancing the visitor experience in our flagship building, the Thomas Jefferson Building. And we recently provided a first look into the visitor experience plan. And we have visuals here today. And we're very pleased that the appropriation in FY 2019 to have a $2 million master plan has allowed us to be able to present these concepts. One, a enhanced orientation experience going into the Thomas Jefferson Building that will include looking at the Thomas Jefferson collection and then being able to be inspired as you are in that area to look up into the reading room, the main reading room. Also, a treasures gallery, where for the first time, the library will be able to showcase the wonderful collections on a rotating basis. And as was mentioned, I am a former children's librarian, and one aspect is the youth center and the possibility of inspiring young people to be more hands-on with technology. The information technology requests continue on the network modernization begun in fiscal 2019 by supporting hybrid hosting, a wireless network that is more robust, and enhanced network capacity. We also have funding for congress.gov, the official website for legislative data, and that will support Congress's requests for more functionality and responsiveness of that very important technology. And so our requests in this year advance our strategic goals, continue on the modernization efforts, and we are very pleased to be able to present specifics about the request today. I look forward to questions and
Great.
glad to discuss.
Ms. Rare Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot we could talk about. There was a couple of things, I mean, the visitor experience alone, I'm sure we could spend most of the hearing on. But I wanted to ask about a couple of programs that aren't as well known that I think really serve. They're really a way to get library services out into the hinterlands of the Republic, such as the surplus book program. And this is something I wasn't aware of until this last year, and had the privilege of delivering a box of surplus books to Centralia Christian School in my district, and it was awesome. It was awesome to bring in, that, like, I think we've talked about this, books in libraries and schools are the first things to go with regard to budgeting, and those get cut back, and you walk into some of those libraries and you think, there's not a lot here to excite and inform. And I think electronics can be an amazing tool, and I use my Kindle, I read off that, but the ability to hold a book, to look at the pictures, to take the time it takes to read or be read to in terms of attention and processing is just, you can't trade that. So I'd love, just for the record and, for other members present, what's the library doing to further promote the program, maybe explain it a little bit, and what's available, and how can we make this program better to ensure more schools and libraries can benefit, because you got the books. How do we get them out?
I was very pleased that you mentioned the delight of the school that received the materials, because they are brand new books. They're not used books of any sort. They are available through the process of selection for the Library of Congress from deposits from the copyright program. And so you have that opportunity to have brand new books that are available for schools, for libraries, and especially if there are any extreme circumstances, tornadoes, things that destroy a library or materials. And so with the program, we're making sure, for instance, that all new members of Congress and their staff members are very aware of the program. and that in our listing of services to Congress, we list and highlight the surplus books program. I've been able to go to certain states where those presentations are made, and it is very heartening. And so we want people to know that we are going to try to maintain that interaction with, as you say, locations that are more remote.
I think my word was hinterland.
Well,
you're the librarian. You
Hinterland
can't
of the
use that
Republic is a-
technical.
More
We need to
remote
coin that
locations.
phrase. That's your phrase.
More
People.
Hinterland of the Republic.
And that's one of the things in terms of our strategic plan in reaching out and using technology. And so we'll be doing more with the webcasts of authors that are here, that we'll be able to, we've tested that out, and we can have interaction with the young people in your state, and they can interact with a famous author right here.
So great.
We also are doing more to strengthen our teaching resources for teachers, so they can download curricular activities very easily. We've been told that we have to remember that all teachers don't have color printers at home. They have limited time. So we're really trying to strengthen what resources we have electronically that teachers can use, librarians can use, and also traveling exhibits. As we expand the visitor experience in the Thomas Jefferson Building, we are looking at a traveling exhibit component, and even possibly bringing back the 18-wheeler. Hopefully 3. One on each coast and one in the middle, to travel to locations and actually bring the library to communities. So outreach has been a major focus, and
Very cool.
it means a lot.
Very cool. I think that's probably.
Fantastic. I know, and we've talked about this, and Chairman Yoder and I talked about it again this morning, about the Enhancing the Visitors Experience Initiative, which is an initiative I've been very interested in and very supportive of. And I'd note for my colleagues who are new to the subcommittee, provided an initial $10 million for the initiative in 2018, $2 million for the strategic plan or the planning and design, and the remaining $8 million was fenced until initial design work and budget estimates are completed and approved, and we look forward to getting that information this summer. We'll need to wait for the plans and the budget, but I think it's very likely the subcommittee will be providing additional funding for the Visitors Experience Initiative. And needless to say, the timing and amounts will depend on the plans and cost estimates, and also will have to be balanced with other competing high priorities that this committee has to look at and within the library. In the meantime, let me invite you to describe some of the exciting projects you are envisioning. For example, what sorts of things would be displayed in the new exhibit areas? How would that differ from current exhibits at the library? And I'm anxious to hear about the youth center too, and your vision for the youth center.
Oh, well, during the course, and we were very appreciative of being able to have a master plan. We've worked very closely from the very beginning with the architect of the Capitol, and also the U.S. Capitol Police, because you're bringing more people in, or in different ways, security issues. So those two entities, but particularly the architect of the Capitol, has been involved in selecting a design firm, Pure and Applied, that has conducted over 75 interviews with all types of stakeholders, particularly Congress, conducted research briefs, best practices. We had people coming in from all over the world, really talking about how they display their collections. And so, in looking at what would be possible in retaining the historic and beautiful nature of this building, the flagship building, the Thomas Jefferson Building, 1897 building, it was found that there are 4 entrances right now that people enter the building. The bulk of the people, 60% of that 1.6 million that come into that building, are coming from the Capitol Visitor Center. That's remarkable. That was one of the best things that could have happened to that building. 60% are coming in. 20% of the visitors that are coming in total are under the age of 18. So we had all of that information. What we found is that people were not aware of what the Library of Congress does or could be, or that it had surplus book programs or veterans history or all the treasures that it had. They didn't know how it came to be. And so now the first concept is to have an orientation experience, that there would be 2 ways into the building initially: the visitor center, Capitol Visitor Center, and the carriage entrance, the ground entrance. And people would come in together and they would look down a pretty interesting hallway that would let people know that famous authors like David McCullough and Doris Kearns Goodwin and Alex Haley had used the Library of Congress, and we'll have quotes for them. They're coming in, and they will see at the end, and there's a circular area there that is actually right under the main
I did
reading
not
room.
see those pictures up there, and I'm like, why is she looking out the window? Because the library, you're the Librarian of Congress. You should at least know where it is, right?
It's sort of an
I
Oculus.
got you, okay.
We're going to talk about an Oculus, too, that is also around. So they're going to look down a hallway, and if you can imagine that, and they will see a circle that will have the reinstalled Thomas Jefferson collection that currently is on the 2nd floor in a kind of corner, and you really have to be motivated to go see it. That is the foundation of the library, and so you will be surrounded by Thomas Jefferson's library, and then you will look up into an orientation Oculus. And I must say, we've been very, we love saying Oculus.
Yeah.
That's just wonderful. It's
Did everybody know what the word was?
We looked it up.
I was going to wait till after the committee hearing to look it up.
Right, and
but
it's,
go ahead.
it's a view, and it's the idea of a look in and a look up, because what we found in the research, and we really responded to that, is that people, initial thoughts of letting people look into that magnificent reading room, we were going to see if we could let them step in, but we heard that, and the feeling was very strong that that might disturb researchers. It really might be too intrusive. And so the idea of still giving people an opportunity to look up and be inspired, especially young people, because you started a reader's card at 16. So you can't use that room until you're 16, but to look up into the reading room. And then you can go to a treasures gallery. I mentioned that earlier, the first time that the library has a true treasures gallery that will rotate some of the collections, the types of collections. Some things will be there forever, the Gutenberg Bible. You will come, but if you make a return visit, you will see different things from the collections. And then the youth center. And yes, we've talked about that. How do we inspire young people? We're concentrating on the ages 7 and up, because that's the age where they're very interested in nonfiction and facts. And in that area, that's on the carriage level, you will have learning labs and ways for young people to interact with our collections in a more meaningful way. And so we're very excited about what types of things could happen in these learning labs. We have an extensive map collection, and young people would be able to create their own GIS systems using technology. We'll be using technology quite a bit in each of the areas. For instance, in the Treasures Gallery, there will be a tabletop unit that if you're visiting from Washington State, you see the map of the United States, you will push that, and the library's resources about your state will come up. You also will be able to take, and our Mr. Bud Barton is here, so if I get too technologically astray, he'll help me with that. But you'll have a device. If you have a device, you'll be able to put it there and download some of the materials to take with you. And the whole idea is to turn those visitors into users, so that they know about what the library has for them. And when they return home, they'll be very aware. So it's very exciting, because the Congress's support of the master plan has been critical for us to have the expertise and the time to do the research. And so they've also given us a comprehensive view of other things in the future that could be built on to these efforts as well.
Yeah. Terrific, terrific. Mr. Newhouse. Oh, Mr. Case, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure whether to declare a conflict here since I'm the proud son of a children's librarian. Suzanne Case got a master's in library science from the University of Hawaii, went on to a career in children's librarians after she had 7 kids. So now I get to say she's part of the congressional record, so thank you for that. Let me just talk about your people a bit, your staff resources. How many total of all of the Library of Congress? Or if you want to talk FTEs, that's fine.
FTEs are very good. And in terms of how, I mentioned library services has the bulk of the staffing, and I'm just turning to the exact numbers. It's 3,301.
All services, right?
All services.
Okay.
That includes copyright,
Right.
CRS, National Library, for the blind and physically handicapped, and library services, all support.
Has that been pretty, I'm sorry.
It's been pretty stable. However,
Over-
there were significant, and Mark Sweeney's a 30-year veteran of the library can talk about some of the declines in staffing that happened, I believe it was in the early 90s, mid-90s. I'll let Mark take over on that one.
Well, we've been very fortunate in the last couple of Congresses to increase the staff expertise in the Congressional Research Service. Those are both NTEs as well as full-time positions. Reconstituting in the Copyright Office, the examiners, which is so important to clearing our registration backlog. And then within Library Services, this year we'll be hiring additional staff to work through backlog of primary special collection material. But the overall staff level, about 3,400 altogether.
And has that been pretty stable for 10 years or so?
Recently upticked a little bit.
Okay.
When I first came on board at the Library of Congress 30 years ago, we had 5,000 employees.
Right.
So we are considerably smaller, but of course technology has enabled us to extend our reach, nationally and internationally.
Do you have, what's your retention rate? Pretty high? People come and stay?
Yes.
Yeah, we average about 200
Look all around,
retirees
look at all these
Yes.
people.
Very, and I have to jump in. There's one, the average tenure is 25 to 30 years. And we have working staff members who've been at the library 50 years. And so very long tenure. And one of our concerns in particular with certain areas, for instance, the request this year for financial services, and to backfill retirements in that area is critical because it's changing.
Yeah, that was kind of
workforce.
my next question was, are there pockets where you
Yes.
are having difficulty recruiting? Or do people just want to work here and they'll work here I mean, the private sector is pretty tight right now. You have some pretty highly specialized areas that
Yes.
you're really depending on a high level of expertise, which is sought after in the private sector. Financial services is one, IT is another. Are you able to recruit now fairly easily, or are you having trouble in some areas that you foresee a need for down the road?
Where the difficulties or challenges might be more in having the positions to recruit people into. We are attractive, and Mr. Barton might want to just, I think he can verify this, in terms of the IT component, we are an interesting entity to work with for IT specialists and people. We have a number in a digital strategy. A lot of the people who are featured in that article are coming into the library because we have interesting challenges. And sometimes that helps balance out, and they have more freedom to design and work with. So in recruiting in IT, we've been fortunate in that. The financial services is just starting to show its impact, and that's where we have the requests this year for being able to recruit in that area. And that's where we're really concerned about that. We want to maintain our unqualified audit record.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And with some strategic retirements in the last year, in fact, we know that we have to be able to be competitive.
And are you
Because of
able to be competitive, given that this is a government salary as opposed to a private sector salary in these areas?
I think that we are very aware of the competition, and so we present our positions in a very interesting way. And we're very,
You're good at marketing, is that what you're saying?
we present the opportunities for people, and we, because this is the world's largest library, and we talk a lot about how different this is, and a certain type of person might be interested in that. So we're aware that we're competing, but we're trying to
Okay, thank you very much.
get in there.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Mr. Newhouse, hate to interrupt you, but it's your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hayden, welcome, and welcome to all of your folks that here this morning. You guys are always so gracious to us when we come to the library or ask for assistance, so it's good for us to be able to reciprocate hospitality, so thank you for being here. And I got to tell you, almost every visitor that comes to Washington, D.C., I tell them they got to go to the Library of Congress. It's the most beautiful, the Jefferson Building is the most beautiful building in the city as far as I'm concerned. So I want to get that on the record too, Mr. Case. I would agree with you that all of these things that you're planning in your strategic plan are going to be tremendous additions to the library to really open it up to people and really explain what's available there. I think you said you keep statistics like baseball does. There are all these things, which is great. But I think you said 1.9 million in-person visits.
Yes.
Last year.
And 1.6 actually are going to that Thomas Jefferson Building.
Is that right?
That's the
Wow.
bulk of the in-person
Busy place.
visits are in that Jefferson Building.
That's just tremendous. It really is. But coming from the hinterland, like Ms. Rare Butler mentioned, that leaves 330 some million people that didn't come. And so I wanted to, we talked about this when you came to visit me in my office, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to help to expound on some of your plans to bring the library to the country. Because a lot of people aren't going to be able to come to Washington,
Right.
D.C., or if they do, it maybe only once, and they won't be able to spend the time it really takes to see what's available there. So I love the idea of your 18-wheelers and,
Yes, the
and
library
that
had
kind of
them.
stuff. And but there's just so many important things available at the library that Americans should be aware of, and we'd like to share them with as many people as possible. So could you talk about how your strategic plan will address that and how we can help?
One of the main ways in terms of expanding the access and enhancing our services is to use technology effectively. And so making sure that we digitize as many of our special collections as possible and make them available online. We just completed, we have the papers of 23 presidents going back from George Washington to Coolidge. We just digitized the papers of Theodore Roosevelt and also Rosa Parks. And so we are looking at and prioritizing and the staffing, and we want to use this opportunity to thank Congress for the 40 FTEs that we received last year to process these special collections and make them available online. That's one of the main ways that we can let people have access to the physical collections remotely. Also being able to put things like our photography collection, we have Dorothea Lange, and we have all of these wonderful, and be able to download as well. Visual displays that could be put into rec centers, community centers that will be similar to what the Smithsonian does with their sites program, their traveling program. Our special services, Veterans History, we've already made quite a few contacts with Veterans History agencies or Veterans Affairs agencies, and we are actually visiting states and districts to help local communities with oral histories of veterans, and we'll be expanding that. So we physically go out to communities and help and train volunteers with that. We mentioned our teaching with primary resources. We have grants that we bring teachers in from all over the country and then have them go back and be part of that. We are networking with the library associations, the state libraries of each state, and we are revitalizing the Center for the Book. That's in each of the states, working with the humanities councils to do more outreach in that sense. The main thing that we're also doing is to tell more people about us, what we do, and that marketing that we mentioned, doing more of that and being very strategic about that as well. So there are all types of cooperative programs and services. Our audio visual and sound recording, when we do that, we just had a program where we're putting up, it's called a movie screening room of non-copyrighted films that are available online as well. And so we're doing so much to advertise the National Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. We just had a public relations campaign, and we've seen an increase already in the number of people who are aware of that service. And there are television and radio commercials that talk about NLS.
Was that right?
And the intergenerational. So any way that we can physically visit as well as that we can use technology has been very effective for
I think
us.
one of my constituents, a teacher from West Valley High School, at least from the school district, participated in your Summer Teacher
Yes.
Institute, which is, it sounds to me, I think that's what you referenced
Yes.
in one of the programs, which is a great way to allow teachers to know what's available. And so
And
you're
they're
continuing to expand that.
Yes, and we use private funding for that and grant making for
Oh.
that. And that also helps. We also have literacy awards that we give to organizations throughout the country, and we bring them in, and they're awarded for their efforts here in DC, and they get to visit. So being able to fund people to come here too and experience has been something that's been very helpful.
And I think, and I should say, her name was Barbara Kipperman, and she learned a lot about how to share what's available here. So it's a very worthwhile program.
So getting the word out is one of the things.
So
Most
just-
people don't even know.
I'm probably over my time, but I should know this, but I think I do. But the only physical presence that we really have of the Library of Congress is here in Washington, D.C.
Actually-
as far as, or not, is there more?
No.
Okay.
And there's physical presence in terms of operations, and then there's the public.
Well, that's what I
aspect.
mean, the
So there are
public
the three
part.
buildings here.
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson, the Adams Building, 1938, and then the Madison Building
Yeah.
that has, for instance, the manuscript division and the
Right.
prints and photographs.
Which is very interesting to
Adams.
tour, by the way, I think.
Very interesting, and the music department.
In someone's office, if I recall.
Yeah, it's something else. And then the Adams Building, the Science and Technology collections are there. And so those three buildings for the campus, the Taylor Street location for the National Library for the Blind, we really would like to have it here, closer to the main campus.
It's in D.C. somewhere? The
It's on Taylor
on
Street.
Taylor
It's
Street,
a
yeah.
rental property. It's renting for 50 years, in fact. So we really have been working to see if we can get that service closer to the main campus. And then there is the David Packard Center for Motion Picture and Audio.
Oh, right, right.
In Culpeper, Virginia. And that is a magnificent facility with a movie theater with a pipe organ and all of that. They show films. However, it's somewhat remote for people. That's why we want to have a presence here as well in terms of the treasures that we have. We want to let people know about those. So those are the three. And then we have overseas offices, but they are more operational, collecting materials. So they're not public facilities.
No other public facilities throughout the country either.
No, no.
Good. Well, thank you very much again for being here.
But the
Appreciate it.
18-wheelers.
Yeah.
Ms. Clark?
Thank you. I now have to recognize my mother, since Congressman Case recognized his mother, Judith Clark. She was a school librarian and then our town librarian. And I remember going with her to, as she was taking courses at Southern New England University for her MLS, which not only made me an advocate for libraries, but also for childcare for our students. While fascinating to her, not a place for a 5-year-old found particularly great. She also, in Connecticut, was one of the first adopters of computerized systems in our town. She was very cutting edge for someone who had only used a typewriter for most of her life. And we have had some issues out of our district office with our veterans who very much want their history to be part of the incredible Veterans History Project that you run. But having to submit a hard copy by fax or by DVD that has to be done by FedEx because it gets ruined under the post service is very cumbersome. And our veterans outreach staffer has had veterans say they're just not going to participate, it's too hard. Does the funding allow you in this budget to to create the ability to have digital uploads from our veterans?
We, as part of our IT modernization, that's one area that we have already been able to look at a pilot project for using mobile devices, and now we are in the process of developing the requirements for how that would work. We've heard that quite a bit in terms of being able to have that capacity. So that's one of the projects that we're really focusing on. And then also I mentioned earlier that the staff will go out to districts as well and might be able to facilitate that type of local taping and help with those types of things. So I'd like to follow up with you on that.
Okay, that'd be
because
terrific.
I think we could do more immediately to
Yeah.
help with that. But you should know that we, in the prototype was actually a gift in kind of to women who were the children of veterans and really wanted to donate in that way. They were software engineers. So it was very helpful for us to be able to have that, to know what would be required. But that's the next step. We have to modernize that.
And do you have the funding within this budget to take that step, or would
Part
it be?
of the funding would be in terms of what the IT modernization plans would be and what we were doing. So that's one of the projects that they'll be looking at.
Great. Now from my staff here in Washington. Lots of anxiety about LIS going away because of the ability to get more information that's available than is available on Congress.gov, co-sponsors, bill texts, et cetera, and really the speed that you're able to get
Yes.
information from LIS. So if you could tell me a little bit, and I'm sorry I missed the beginning of this.
That's
This
all
is
right.
repeating your testimony, but there is anxiety that the more modern, faster system is being retired and the clunkier Congress.gov is being preserved, and how are we going to blend the best features?
Now, we do have a request for that specifically
All right.
in this year to speed up the improvements to Congress.gov. And Mary Mazanek is here and Ed Barton to talk about some of the specifics, but we will make sure that Congress.gov has enhanced functionality as we move forward. And that's the part that we're really very aware of, and also the speed in terms of how things are authenticated.
Yeah.
That's where Congress.gov has more authentication, and the legacy system, LIS, is about 20 years old, and so it was a very specific system, and now we have merged to something that was called Thomas, that was the public-facing. government information source into congress.gov. So I hope that people, and we'll be doing more to work with staff to reassure them that congress.gov is
I
definitely.
appreciate that.
One of the things in this request, and Mary Mazanek, I'll have Mary Mazanek come up just a little bit.
Yeah, because it's
But on her way out.
3.6 million in this
Right,
budget.
and
But the
that's-
retirement's looking at this summer for LIS.
Yes, and so with that, just to reassure you that we will be making sure that that functionality and increased functionality will be part. So in terms of the request, it's people and actually technology
Great.
for people, in fact.
Got your own
To
name
work on.
tag right there.
This is CRS.
And actually,
Yeah,
Bud Barton will
Bud
also,
Barton for the
will
technical.
also be able to respond to some of your technical concerns, but thank you for this question. Obviously, we don't want to retire LIS.
Turn your microphone on, please.
We don't want to retire LIS before the congressional user, is comfortable with congress.gov. As Dr. Hayden said, LIS is a legacy system. It was created over 20 years ago, over several years, and it's highly customized, driven by the needs of Congress. But it's more and more difficult to maintain. Congress.gov is actually the newer system, and it leverages the advancements in technology to present the information. And there are two parts to it. There's the public face of Congress.gov and the congressional face. CRS works in partnership with the Office of the Chief Information Officer, and also Law Library has a piece of this. They deal with the public face to build out congress.gov. And there's a lot of effort to gather input from the congressional user so that as we design and develop congress.gov, it meets your needs. CRS also provides support to the congressional user on a daily basis. We take in questions, we respond to concerns. We are also helping, we do provide some of the content. We do the bill summaries. We also have hired people to work with OCIO to define the requirements and to make sure that they are incorporated. As Dr. Hayden mentioned on another topic, CRS will be doing a lot of outreach. We already have started providing written materials, doing trainings, and actually making sure that the congressional user is comfortable with the new website.
And I think I mentioned that it, yeah, Bud
assuming
might
you're Bud.
also. Bud, Bernard, Bud,
Yeah, you're on the
Barton, who
record
has.
5 times. You need to come up here.
Well, and I just have to say, as he comes up, Mr. Barton has led the information technology modernization effort of the library. The GAO reports, 27 of the 31 public recommendations have been closed and implemented, with the remaining 4 at GAO to be reviewed. The progress has been substantial, and he's had to help with CRS, copyright, NLS, and library services, so.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity
Put that on the
to
record.
address this question. I would like to reinforce that the job of the CIO at the library is to make sure that the library efficiently and effectively uses technology. Our #1 commitment is to Congress, and my #1 commitment on the retirement of LIS and integrating into congress.gov is we will not be turning off LIS until we have the equivalent functionality in congress.gov. We have worked very closely with many members, staff on both the House and the Senate side to make sure that as concerns are raised, we address them as best we can, realizing that a lot of the modernization requirements are not driven by the library, but by advances in technology. Some of the data sources that we receive the content from that goes into congress.gov, GPO, both the House and the Senate, they are modernizing their systems at the same time. And LIS in its current form is unable to take advantage of those new data streams. So we have to do the move in order to make sure that we can keep current with the data that's available to show to your constituents and to congressional members about what is available for your use. So my commitment is we will not be turning off LIS until we have equivalent functionality within congress.gov. Where we could use some help is making sure that staff is aware that we are doing this effort. We have some communications that should be going out to each of the staff offices, showing what our desired turnover period is, asking for input on any issues. As Mary Masnick mentioned, we are dealing with questions every day on how do we get this particular text updated. This isn't showing up in congress.gov. And a lot of that has to do with these changes in how data is being routed for publication. So we are committed to making sure that Congress has the data that they need, and committed to making sure that we provide the education necessary or training necessary to show people that here is the functionality that you're used to in LIS. Here's how you get to that in congress.gov. So I want to reassure everyone, we are not going to be turning off LIS until you have equivalent functionality.
We have that on the record.
That's
Yes.
great. Thank you so much.
Let me just say thank you, too. I mean, and to your entire staff, Dr. Hayden, so often we take for granted as we move around and do our thing here and meeting to meeting to meeting, we sometimes forget to say thank you to the people who make all of this possible for us and our staff.
Yeah.
So we want to just say thank you. Very much appreciated by all of us, as you could tell from Ms. Clark's question. Something you're doing behind the scenes and nobody really knows who Bud is. Till now. Till
They
now.
do now.
Thank you.
We may start calling every employee behind the scenes Bud. But we appreciate it and thank you for all your hard work. I'm sure it's a big
Thank you so
challenge,
much.
so thank you.
Thank you.
I have just a couple questions, and I'd like to actually ask about the National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. So could we get Karen to
Yes,
come up?
and we're very pleased to be able to talk about also the use of technology in advancing those services. For
Yeah. Yeah.
The e-reader project, the fact that we are looking at moving to a digital platform for delivering talking books and that, and so
Yeah.
Karen has been working very diligently on that.
Karen, thank you. First, thank you for coming up. The budget request is $2.375 million to support purchase of Braille e-readers for users of the NLS system. And I understand these e-readers are a new generation technology that can greatly improve delivery and reading of books in Braille. Can you explain what these new e-readers do and how they would be used in your program?
Certainly. The Braille e-reader is a device that allows you to take a digital Braille file that is a small ASCII type file, and it will convert that file similar to what you do with a computer like the screen looks at an ASCII code and it gives you an A. This would look at the ASCII code and give you a Braille A in pins that, I actually have one right here, that pop up and down so that it changes the display.
Oh.
And so Braille is a 6-dot system, and so there's 6 dots per cell, and these little pins, they just pop up and down, and they change the display, and you can read on them. So we have a digital Braille program already in terms of making our Braille available for download from the internet for anyone who actually owns a digital device. But a lot of the people that we serve aren't able to purchase them, and so aren't able to take advantage of that. The advantages are significant in terms of cost for production of hard copy Braille, as well as for the shipping and maintenance of the collections and the bulk that the actual individual user has to address. A Braille book, a good-sized Braille book might be 6 or 8 volumes that take up that much shelf space. So the advantages will be going to a fully digital Braille program by purchasing these devices over a number of years will allow us in time to have a lot more content available and also a much more modern way of reading and using Braille.
How many will this purchase, do you know?
That,
The 2.375 million?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think probably about 3,500. We are in the process of negotiating a final contract, and I'm not quite sure what the price is going to be, but I think that's a good estimate.
Tell him the chairman of the committee is very cheap, and he better give you a good deal on them. The budget also requests $5 million for replacing a website called BARD with a more modern and usable system. Can you tell us what BARD does, why it needs fixing, and what the benefits of the upgrade would be?
Yes. BARD is a legacy system which was intended as a download system so that people could download both digital Braille and digital talking books. And it's been in place for about 10 years. It is not scalable. It can serve about maybe 50,000 people right now, which is about what it's serving. And the need to expand it so that we can serve a lot more people is why we need to rebuild it. It needs to be, the architecture of it needs to be changed so that it is scalable, because we are anticipating that the population that we serve is going to increase as we ease access to people with other types of disabilities, such as reading disabilities, dyslexia, and that sort of thing. And in order to do that, we have to be able to serve them. And at this point in time, BARD is not sufficient to serve an expanded patron base, and that's the primary reason that we need to expand it.
How many people use it now?
About 50,000,
And you think it'll go to what?
a million.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's the capacity that we're
That's-
looking for.
Yeah, that's significant.
Because it'll be scalable, cloud-based and scalable, so it will be able to go up and down with the needs.
And is there a marketing plan attached to this once you get it cranked up?
Yes, we
It
are.
sounds like it if you're going to go from
We
50,000 to a
started, yeah.
million.
Yes, certainly, we will be changing, we are anticipating anyway, that we're requesting to change the legislation that is our funding legislation, and also the certification requirements, and then we will market that to the education community and to other communities that have people that would be eligible to use the systems.
I think you mentioned it in your testimony, Dr. Hayden, about this particular program. How many, was it 20 million that you said, people accessing the services for the blind?
At this
I mean,
point,
there were so many. There were,
450.
you
We
had
had
so
so
many
many
numbers in there.
statistics, we were very pleased. The circulation is about 400, that was the circulation of the materials. And
Yeah.
about, Karen, 450,000
at this point, yes, about 450,000.
people that are subscribing to the,
Let me ask this, how many blind people are there in the United States? Do we know?
Maybe 10 million.
10 million?
That's blind and visually impaired. I think the blindness number is maybe 2 million, and the visually impaired number. It's hard, these are hard numbers to get hold of, but the estimate is somewhere in that range.
And the goal, obviously, is to try to get as many engaged as possible.
Yes.
And so the network, what are the networks you use to reach out? You mentioned the education network. Like when you're reaching out and marketing the Baird program, what are the other networks you will interface with to try to connect to that population?
There are disability organizations that serve people with dyslexia and other reading disabilities, and we will certainly reach out to those organizations as well, those networks. But the primary network for people, especially people with reading disabilities, actually is the education system, because that's where the reading disabilities are diagnosed, and that's where people are aware of this need. There are adults with dyslexia, obviously, and that there's no, aside from the disability organizations, there's not a way to identify them readily, but we are working right now with the Gallup organization to try to find better ways to identify them and to get a better handle on that. We actually have a contract that we're working on right now to gather that sort of information. And we will also be reaching out just to the general public through digital advertising, and right now we're also doing television and radio advertising, just reaching out.
Great. Well, terrific. Well, thank you. This is really exciting. This is an
It is.
exciting part.
And another example of the use of technology to
Mm-hmm.
enhance services that we already have.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
really-
If you have any questions about this, just ask Bud, okay? Got all the
Bud is
answers.
on board with us.
Okay.
Seas Park, and that's the behind the
Yes,
scenes.
Mr. Newhouse?
Real quickly, Mr. Chairman, if we could get a demonstration of the device that Karen had, that would be very interesting.
Yeah.
Is that,
We could. You could do
Whenever
it
there's
today,
time. Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
if you have time afterwards, because
Okay.
it's very
Yeah,
impressive.
that'd be great.
So you have veterans, NLS, government information, digitizing collections. Technology is really, that infrastructure is really important to us.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you to Ms. Ferrer Butler, any good of the order here? Thank you. We appreciate it.
Oh,
We're
thank
excited.
you
We're
for the
excited for
funding.
everything that's happening and look forward to having further conversations with you.
Thank you.
All right.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Hayden. Thank you.
Karen, you want to